Good afternoon. How are you today? Well, it's both warm and cold at the same time. It's 52 degrees, but the winds are blowing at 15 miles an hour, so much so that the tower that sends the internet signal to my home office is not working, but it'll come on anytime soon. Now, my phone is different because it'll operate on the network, the Verizon network. So some people will see this before I have to put the link up. So we'll see. I don't know when when we'll have internet capability. The Jefferson report now concluded. Let me consider what else is going on. I guess a bunch of us all took SAT tests or other tests. And that is not the same thing as a cognitive test. Or when I had to take the bar exam, which is 24 areas of the law, some of which I've never used. And it's basically a cramming test so that you could, I guess, demonstrate that you could study some of these areas that you would never use. But those tests are different than cognitive tests. And I won't make any jokes about it, but Trump is running around bragging that he's got some range of compos mentis, and who knows what those tests really did show for him in his case. But they don't show content so much, and I wonder if we wouldn't learn more if somebody would tell us what his SAT scores were. He supposedly went to Fordham, but I was at Fordham when he was at Fordham, and I never saw him at Fordham, nor is there any person I know that saw him at Fordham who was at Fordham. I went to Fordham in Columbia, so he didn't go to Columbia. I don't know where he went. And he brags about what a genius he is, but it's not evident. Now, I think of Oscar Wilde, not just because he's Irish, but because he made some interesting observations. It was like he was always stage present, if you will. And in one of his writings, he talked about how if you presented a certain persona, if you will, over time, you became that persona. Now, I don't know that Trump was ever like a normal person who cared about others and cared to do the right thing rather than taking the shortcut. I don't know if he was ever, how can I say, welcome to the thought of differences in others. They didn't just tolerate, but he celebrated. So Trump is a guy who, first of all, in the area that's not about cognition, but which is about attitudes, person, character, knowledge, that kind of stuff. And we should not be impressed by that, and we should be scared of it, because if he has developed himself into a certain person, as Oscar Wilde suggests is possible, and I think did occur in his own life, then we have a lot to be concerned about. Now, if on top of that, he's suffering from a cognitive degradation, that's also something to be concerned about, so we should watch that. Now, it comes to mind in part because the Oscars were last night, and Kimmel, who was the host, the fourth time, I believe, for the Oscars, he got into a duel with Trump. Now, it may be said that in a battle of wits, if your opponent is unarmed, you are at a disadvantage. So, a translation of that in the case of Kimmel and Trump is Kimmel plainly has a first-class mind. It's the kind of comic mind as well that can take a bit of information and immediately posture it in a way that it's funny. Okay. Trump, on the other hand, it's almost like the bad comic who insults people, but not as well as comics who do that, and therefore gets applause for his half-ass performance. So, what exactly was the battle of wits? Well, Trump said Kimmel was the worst host of the Oscars there ever was. And Kimmel was discouraged from answering this post that Trump put up. But finally he said, well, I got to do it anyway, because he had extra time. They actually got ahead of the schedule. And Kimmel said, isn't it past your jail time? In response. So see if you can find it online now, though, because it looks like it's been taken down. And you have to wonder if we're not already suffering from the censorship that a so-called free country does not permit. So there is that, and I wondered about it because you can't find it online, I don't believe. And if you do, please post it when I post my remarks so we can share it. Now, more. It appears that Trump appeared on CNBC's Squawk Box, and when he was on there, they asked him all sorts of questions, and one of them was about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And he said that we should be considering cutting entitlements. Now, the word entitlements is annoying, but it's a system in which you are getting a benefit back. I mean, if you think of it more like insurance, you pay into a system, people when they can retire at the ages they do, receive certain benefits based in part on how they contributed during their working years. And then there are other ways and so forth. So, and Medicare is an answer in part, a partial answer, to what happens as the thinking meat that we inhabit over time doesn't do what it did in its 20s. And we therefore can have a whole variety of health concerns. And the idea is to be able to enjoy life as much as possible by having some security socially. That is, your food secure, you're not hungry, and that your habitation secure, you're not on the street. And Medicare, that you're receiving the health care that you need to survive. So when Biden gave his State of the Union message a year earlier, he embarrassed the Republicans by asking them to stand up and say that they would support Social Security and Medicare. And now Trump is on the air on the Squawk Box saying we have to consider cutting these entitlements. Now, Trump is just out there jumping around trying to find ways to get out of the situation in which the walls are coming in and the ceiling and the floor compressing him. And I don't know if they still do that, but when I was a kid you saw these kinds of situations, and I suppose it was low tech and scary as hell. And I think that that's where Trump is in the evenings, no matter how much he may hit his chest and squawk about his manliness and genius and why he's the person who should be in the West Wing. We get to see him enough to know if reason matters and if policy matters. We get a chance to see he just doesn't belong. He was righteously kicked out in 2020, and he will again. But on the way to being kicked out, he has a trial coming up, the New York case. And he's making noises about immunity for paying hush money. And we'll see how far he pushes that, trying to get past the date of March the 25th, when that trial is supposed to begin. Now, one way the state can consider that is to just dismiss it out of hand and to deny any appeal while the case is pending. In other words, to reserve that question to the point where, unless and until he's convicted, it's not relevant. Now, we'll see how that plays out, but that's what our most courageous former president says about accounting for his misconduct, trying to overthrow the government, to install himself, though he lost the election. Now, Trump is a guy who never learns, in the sense of, when you catch him in one kind of crime or civil offense or abuse, he'll go and do it again. And so, for example, he's been hammered by Ms. Carroll for his defamation and sexual abuse of her. And over the weekend, it was on the Squawk Box. It was on the Squawk Box, CNBC, same show as the one he told us that we could cut Social Security and Medicare. On their Squawk Box, he says he denied the rape and defamation claims, thereby setting himself up again for a possible additional trial or hearing on this most recent outrage against Ms. Carroll. So, I started this a little bit with, what is the content of a man's mind, Trump? What is the content of his soul, a vacuum? What is his cognition of what he's doing? But as a person who would present himself as the leader of the free world, if the rest of the world still considers us a contender in that category, he fails miserably. And we cannot allow this man to become president again. And what that means is we have our work cut out for us to say to anyone who will listen, whenever we have the opportunity, to say that Trump is history, must remain there. We're better than this. And he puts us all at risk because his policies are destructive of human life, of dignity, of the freedoms that this nation represents imperfectly, that is still working to perfect. So, that's what I got for you today. And I hope and expect to see you tomorrow. And so I say goodbye from my cathedral of trees, getting slightly greener each day, all the better. Bye-bye.